Hello and welcome into another episode of Lockdown Wolves. Today on the show, what can Bones Hyland's successful year with the Nuggets tell us about potential viable lineups, including Bones Hyland moving forward? We'll dig into the Bones minutes next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Lockdown Wolves. Of course, Lockdown Wolves is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to us by our friends at FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Today on the show, we're talking Bones Hyland. Now that he may not be starting, Wednesday night if Anthony Edwards comes back from injury, but we may be looking at a new member of the Timberwolves rotation. We'll see how it all shakes out when Mike Conley returns as well. But the way that Bones Hyland has played for the game plus that he's played in the rotation, he got hurt midway through the game on Friday against Golden State. I think it's worth looking back at what he did in Denver in his rookie season to see what was so successful about Bones as a rookie, as an NBA rotation player on a solid Nuggets team, and what types of lineups he succeeded the most with, what that could look like on this current Timberwolves team. So I want to spend a decent chunk here of today's show talking about a couple other things to hit, as you can see here if you're watching on YouTube, on the rundown as well. And eventually I want to get into some strength of schedule stuff and evaluating the Wolves right now. A surprising stat about just how good the Wolves have been this year. The numbers don't lie. They've been solid despite, the roller coaster that we've been on so far. So we'll get to that a little bit later in the show. First, though, a big thank you for making Lockdown Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Lockdown Wolves. All right. So I want to talk about Bones Hyland. The quick, if you're not super familiar with Bones and his game and his history, the quick kind of easy version on Bones Hyland is he was a draft pick of Tim Conley when he was with Denver. And until I dug into this a little bit, I'd forgotten that he actually only was in charge of the Nuggets for one season when Bones Hyland was there. He drafted him at the end of the first round in 2021. And he was a rotation piece coming off the bench, averaging 19 minutes a game for a Denver team that really got better as the season went on. And this was like, it ended up being a 48-win Nuggets team that finished with the 6th seed in the Western Conference, and they lost in 5 games to Golden State in the first round. Tim Conley left that offseason, was hired away by Minnesota to come run the Timberwolves, and then, of course, Denver went on to win the championship that very next year with Calvin Booth assuming the front office role, but obviously the roster predominantly assembled by Tim Conley. And Bones Hyland was his last first-round draft pick as the guy running the front office in Denver. Midway through the next season, Calvin Booth trades Bones Hyland to the Clippers. And of course, there were rumors at the time that Tim Conley was interested in Minnesota. Bones has basically, almost 2 calendar years of kind of a tumultuous time in LA, in and out of the lineup. Never played more than, he hasn't actually played in more than, he played in 69 games his first season in the league, 56 games in year 2, and then only 37 2 years ago, 24 last year, mostly because he was out of the rotation, not necessarily injuries. So you got to go back to his rookie season to find a time when he actually played with regularity, really his first 2 seasons with regularity, and was a part of successful teams in the rotation. And I don't think it's it's obvious. The best that Bones Hyland has played was his rookie season, when he played in those 69 games, predominantly off the bench for the Nuggets. He shot just a shade over 40% from the field. And that's 46.5% from 2, 36.5% from 3. Averaged 10 points, nearly 3 assists per game. I'm less concerned with the per game averages and even the rate-based stats individually, and more with the types of lineups that Bones Hyland succeeded with. Because he is playing point guard in Minnesota. That's the role he's been in all season for the Timberwolves. And right now, of course, he's in the starting lineup because of the absence of Anthony Edwards. Ant has been the de facto point guard for Minnesota. And so it's a backcourt of Dante DiVincenzo and Bones Hyland right now that we're seeing. And for the most part, it's been really good. And the returns on Bones in the rotation are super positive. But I wanted to look at like what are the other backcourts that he worked with, going back to the 2021, 2022 season with the Denver Nuggets. And it was actually kind of a funny mini research project here on Cleaning the Glass to go back and look at those lineups. You're going to recognize some of these names that he played with because they've also played for Tim Conley in Minnesota. The number one lineup that he played with in terms of possessions is Hyland was in the backcourt with Bryn Forbes, former Timberwolf, Austin Rivers, former Timberwolf, and then also JaMychal Green and DeMarcus Cousins. So a weird lineup, a weird team. That's the lineup he played with the most in the 2021-22 season, his rookie season in the league. The second most used lineup with Bones Hyland didn't have any former Timberwolves, and that was something closer to the actual starting lineup for the Nuggets. Will Barton, Aaron Gordon, JaMychal Green, Nikola Jokic, just a massive lineup with that, the length. Aaron Gordon essentially played in the three with that lineup. Then his third most used lineup, which was his most successful of these three, was with another former Timberwolf in Marcus Morris. Also Will Barton, Aaron Gordon, and Nikola Jokic. What do two of those three lineups, what do they have in common? Well, he was with another primary ball handler, obviously with Marcus Morris in his most successful lineup. Will Barton, not a point guard. And, Aaron Gordon can play some point forward, and obviously Jokic is Jokic. But that lineup with Marcus Morris and also with Aaron Gordon and Nikola Jokic, Bones isn't having to initiate a whole lot with that group. The Austin Rivers, Bryn Forbes group, all three of those guys are kind of combo guards. Like Bryn Forbes is more of a shooter, was technically a point guard because of his size, but he was really a catch and shoot type guy. Austin Rivers is a scoring minded guard, but played point guard at times in his career as well. So really that was like in some ways, a version of what Tim Connelly's doing in Minnesota, or trying to do, I guess, attempting to do, not having a point guard on the floor a lot, to have just, okay, Forbes and Bones and Rivers will figure this thing out between the three of them. And that's not even a lineup that had Jokic or Aaron Gordon on the floor who can also run some offense. So I think that's pretty fascinating, first of all, because for two reasons. One, there's the Tim Connelly angle, which is not the first time Tim Connelly's gone about things without a true point guard. I mean, look at all of the teams that Tim Connelly assembled in Denver. Not a whole lot of like true floor general point guards there. And then the second piece of it is the Bones Hyland piece, which is in two of his three most used lineups, he's on the floor with at least one other ball handling guard that initiates offense. And the Marcus Morris one, which is the lineup that he was most successful with. Marcus Morris is a point guard, also a point guard that Tim Connelly acquired for the Timberwolves a couple years ago. Just for reference, his fourth most used lineup had the Brazilian point guard Facundo Campazzo, who the Timberwolves were interested in. Gerson Rosas was interested in at the time, and I enjoyed watching him play. Actually, that lineup was also very successful in just 59 possessions. So we could say three of the top four lineups with Bones that season had another primary ball handler in them, and they were all, by the way, successful lineups. When Bones Hyland was the primary ball handler, the lineups were not nearly as successful. You go down and find some of the lineups where it was him and Austin Rivers in the backcourt, and the three was Will Barton or Aaron Gordon or let's see, who else? Devon Reid, right? Part of that is just talent level of those lineups, and not, Zeke Najee's on the floor, or, late career DeMarcus Cousins is on the floor instead of Jokic, instead of JaMychal Green and Aaron Gordon. Those are going to be less success. Those were less successful lineups because Bones Hyland isn't a traditional natural point guard. And he's done it to some effect this year, but I think longer term, if he's sharing the floor with Anthony Edwards, say, like Bones Hyland isn't necessarily initiating offense. He's going to be the second side creator for the Timberwolves if Ant's running the offense. Bones is going to be the guy who's got to attack off the dribble because there's space for him to do so. And I think he can find success doing that with the Timberwolves. He's not the most efficient scorer. Like the Bones Hyland, the archetype he fits is a high volume, modest efficiency scorer, which is not like the most effective type of NBA player archetype, but it's exactly the type of player that kind of sort of fits with Anthony Edwards because it's somebody that can be effective if they're given a mismatch, if they're given an unbalanced floor and they have space to operate, they can catch and shoot on open threes and they're not being asked to do too much. I mean, Bones Hyland for his career is essentially a league average 3-point shooter, actually a little below that. He doesn't get to the free throw line very much. he doesn't have, like, for the amount of point guard he's played, it's a pretty modest assist rate. He turns it over a fair amount, and he has this year. He's got an 18% turnover rate in under 200 minutes so far this year. But still, it's really more the idea of what Bones Hyland can do and the pressure he can put on a defense if he's that second side creator, right? Like having him on the other side of the floor who's going to be decisive and usually make the right choice, even if the shot doesn't go in or he makes a sloppy pass or whatever. It's more effective than some of the other options the Timberwolves have on the fringe of their rotation because he's going to be decisive and going to have, that attacking mentality and give the offense a little bit of juice. It's that kind of the floor of like, hey, he could just be effective and just kind of give us these hectic minutes that are beneficial. And then the ceiling of what he did late in the game the other night, where he just kind of goes off for this brief, snapshot. He did that a couple times in Denver, where a few minutes it's like, all right, Bones is hot. Like, we're probably going to win this game because the dude can't miss. And then it's a little bit more of a roller coaster the rest of the time. But that sort of high variance play opposite Anthony Edwards, like, it's not great that that's where we're at on December 15th is like 16th is, we need this opposite Anthony Edwards to keep the offense moving. But I think it's kind of what they were hoping Rod Dillingham would be, minus, I think Dillingham, the best version of Dillingham, obviously still has a higher ceiling than Bones Hyland, but is a better passer than Bones Hyland as well. And we're just not there right now. So pairing him with another primary ball handler, not expecting him to like be the guy that runs the offense. And that's not to mention Julius Randle and Jaden McDaniels, who I spent some time talking about yesterday on the postgame pod following Sunday's win. Both Randle and McDaniels ran some offense, were kind of hubs for Minnesota on Sunday in the win against the Kings. And that's important too. So to not put too much on Bones Hyland's shoulders, like, all right, you're our point guard. He's got to be with another creating guard. And worst case, with a creating forward like a Julius Randle. And Bones can kind of be that high variance, hopefully not too high volume scorer, where this guy can go off at any point in time. If the floor bends too much towards Anthony Edwards, if the defense is so concerned about Ant, you could skip past it to Bones. He's going to attack and score. He's going to at least put pressure on the defense in that way, and then maybe open up, a swing, a driving kick to the other side, and Ant gets the ball back if he gets off of it early in the possession. And Bones can kind of help that with that ball movement and keeping the offense flowing. There's certainly some upside there when it comes to Bones Hyland. So the key thing to look for is other lineups with, or I should say lineups with another primary ball handler / creator. It can't just be Bones along with Dante DiVincenzo. And like, it's working right now across 2 games because of how Jaden and Julius Randle are playing. But it's not realistic to say, all right, Bones Hyland's going to run a bench unit that doesn't include Ant or Julius Randle. It's going to be Bones Hyland and Terrence Shannon and Jalen Clark. Like, that's not going to work. He's got to be with somebody else that's going to help create for others and play off of them as a secondary scorer, as a secondary playmaker. He could be effective in that role. All right. Next, I want to get into a couple of quick things that are over on ESPN. Trade season starts now, so there's some interesting stuff about like guys who are eligible to be traded and who are not eligible to be traded. Some quick Wolves notes there, and also the 25 under 25 list on ESPN. And then getting into the strength of schedule stuff, which is pretty interesting, and some interesting stats about where the Wolves are right now in the season compared to the rest of the best teams in the league. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors over at FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. And that's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver might get hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. Live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. Player props update as guys heat up. You could bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, and every possibility. As of right now, still no Wolves line for Wednesday night. Of course, lots of fun NFL coming up this week. Like Saturday night, Packers at Bears should be fun. Saturday football, NFL football is back. We get, I think, Eagles at Commanders and Packers at Bears. Fun games on Saturday. Eagles favored by 6.5 on the road at Washington, who's shutting down Jaden Daniels. The Packers still favored 1.5 at Chicago, despite all the injuries the Packers had on Sunday. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Big thank you once again for making Locked On Wolves your first listen of the day, and a big thanks also for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. We could not do it without you, the loyal listener that makes us your first listen every day. You already live your team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Wolves with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. You could go to lockedonwolves.supercast.com or check the link in the show notes to learn more. Okay, so trade season unofficially started yesterday. December 15th is when the majority of players that were signed in the offseason are eligible to be traded. There are some exceptions. So, for instance, Reid still couldn't be traded if the Wolves wanted to, which I'm sure they don't. Can't be traded till January 15th because the Timberwolves re-signed him as their own player with bird rights. So can't go anywhere until mid-January. But most players who were acquired in the offseason or signed in the offseason can now be traded. So we're officially in trade season. The cliff notes on the Timberwolves, we've talked about this before, but Timberwolves can make a trade. They're below the second apron, so they don't have to just go 1-for-1, but they can't take back more salary in a trade than they send out. So normally you could be within, I think it's 10%. You could, if you're under the cap, you could take back a little bit more than you're sending out. The Wolves cannot do that. They have to send out more than they receive. And the other important thing is they don't have any first-round picks they could trade. They could still swap picks in 2028. So like that would be, so we talked on Friday's show about a potential Coby White trade. If Minnesota tried to trade for Coby White, they could offer a pick swap in 28 and then some combination of Rob Dillingham, TJ Shannon, Mike Conley, Dante DiVincenzo. Like those guys are all guys that could be traded. I don't think the Bulls would be psyched about like Conley, a pick swap, and Rob Dillingham. But like, I don't know, the Wolves should consider that. Like Coby White's going to be a free agent this summer, which is the main hesitation, I'm sure, for the Wolves side. I would not, however, trade Dante DiVincenzo because then you're shipping out two current pieces in your rotation in Conley and DiVincenzo and only getting one back, and plus probably having to include a pick swap still. So if they take Dillingham, and I would consider Shannon, although I still think Shannon's probably more valuable to the Wolves this season than Rob Dillingham is, even if Rob Dillingham has overall a little bit more trade value. Of course, his contract is like 3 times what Shannon's is because of where he was drafted in the first round. So the lack of first rounders to trade, they do have some seconds to trade. And the only major expiring contract they have is Mike Conley. Otherwise, you're talking young player assets and Dante DiVincenzo, who's got 2 years left at a really palatable number. And it was one of the more valuable contracts in the league. It's like a borderline top 100 player making what he makes. And one more year after this one, DiVincenzo's got extremely high trade value relative to like typical rotation guys, right? Conley's expiring is 10.7, Dillingham, Shannon, and I guess Jalen Clark would all be guys on rookie deals who would have some value on the trade market. So just kind of resetting that. We talked about Coby White Friday. We talked, I don't know if we ever actually, I didn't spend that much time on Giannis. Maybe at some point. I think like there'd have to be a third team involved in a Giannis deal. I don't want to spend too much time digging into that. I just don't think it's all that realistic. And also Minnesota's really got to think about like, trading Dillingham and a pick swap and Conley for Coby White is a very different thing than trading like Jaden McDaniels and whatever else you can grab that's not nailed down for Giannis. And I get it because it's Giannis, and with Giannis and Ant, you should be, favorites to at least play the Thunder in the Western Conference Finals and have a shot to get past them. There's all these other things with Giannis related to age and how excited would he be to come to Minnesota, and like obviously injury related to the age, like all those things. Whereas Jaden McDaniels is having a breakthrough season, the best season of his career. So, and I'm not at all saying he's anywhere in the same stratosphere as Giannis in terms of overall player value, but there's just a lot more factors at play there, I think, that have to be considered. Along those same lines, very quickly wanted to talk about the 25 under 25 ranking at ESPN. This is an article they do every year where there's like 5 or 6 guys at ESPN, which includes former front office, Bobby Marks, Kevin Belton was in the front office at one point, Tim Bontemps, who does a good job covering the league. They rank the top 25 players under the age of 25 based on long-term potential. So it's not supposed to be what they're doing right now. It's what's the long-term potential. So like some guys broke in for the first time. Reid wasn't on the list last year. He's 25. Ausar Thompson with the Pistons, same thing. Josh Giddey's on the list. Wasn't on the list last year. I think he was a couple years ago, but broke back onto the list. Alex Sarr is on the list for the first time. Jalen Suggs dropped a few spots. So it's a lot of the names you might expect. Interestingly, though, rookies, VJ Edgecombe is 19, Dylan Harper is 18, Con Knippel is 17. And then, Stephon Castle is 16. So like a bunch of, I guess he's not a rookie, but Dylan Harper, he's on here somewhere. Maybe he's not. I thought he was. Anyway, that's an interesting stretch of guys in terms of rookies and second-year guys right there kind of towards the back half of it. The highest ranking player who was not on the list last year, besides Cooper Flagg, of course, is Jalen Duren at 14. Otherwise, you have to get all the way up to Cooper Flagg at 8 to find a guy who broke on the list who wasn't on it before. The biggest riser, Amen Thompson, went from 22 to 6. And then Anthony Edwards is still number 2 on this list. He's one spot ahead of Cade Cunningham, who went from 13 to 3. 2 spots ahead of Jalen Williams, who went from 9 to 4. Not surprising. I think anybody would rank Ant ahead of those guys in a vacuum, but it's getting closer. He's one spot behind Victor Wembanyama, who also was first last year, by the way. And he's just 21. So it's crazy. But I get it. Like, it all makes sense. And Ant being number 2, this is his last year on the list, also makes sense. It says to take the next step, Edwards needs to improve in terms of his assisted turnover. And I don't disagree with that. Like, given how much he's essentially running the offense, his assist rate is not in a great place. The actual, counting stats, assists per game, the turnover stuff, there's some growth to be had there for sure. But he's shown progress over the last couple of years. And, I can't really quibble with him being behind Wembanyama based on the start to the season for each of these guys. Wemby's playing better than Ant. There's no question about it. I'm not going to, I know before the season, I was hesitant to put Wemby ahead of Ant on the current list of best players in the league. I think I had Ant 5 and Wemby 6 on my list, taking Jason Tatum out of it because of the injury, taking Tyrese Halliburton out of it. It's probably time to switch him. I think Wemby's got to be 5. I think Ant's got to be 6 based on what we've seen so far this season. So that'll be something we'll talk about as we move forward. But I thought that 25 under 25 list from late last week was intriguing. I want to close the show today by talking about the Timberwolves right now. An interesting statistic about just how good they've been to this point in the season, and then also the strength of schedule as of now and looking ahead, going back to something I talked about before the season in bold predictions. We'll get to all that here next to close out the show. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Skims. When Skims announced that they were making underwear for men, the reaction made perfect sense. People have been talking about Skims comfort for years. Most guys, though, stick to whatever they've been buying since college. The same fits, the same waistbands, that roll up, which is super uncomfortable, and a whole lot of settling. Skims Men's changes that. One upgrade, and it's obvious why everyone's been talking. Once I tried Skims underwear, I got the hype immediately. They're designed to feel good, fit right, and actually stay put, with no slipping, no sagging, no adjusting. Just genuinely great underwear that makes you feel confident and comfortable. Skims was kind enough to send some out. I grabbed the 5-inch stretch boxer briefs, and they fit really, really well. The fabric's great. They don't feel like workout underwear, but they kind of have that like wicking fabric, which is really comfortable. They don't ride up. They don't lose their shape. They hit where they're supposed to on your thigh. Again, you can get the 5-inch or the 3-inch. I like the 5-inch. You wouldn't think that underwear is necessarily a game changer, but Skims completely surprised me. Skims completely surprised me. Shop Skims Men's now at skims.com. When you place your order, choose podcast in the post-purchase survey and select our show from the drop-down to let them know that we sent you. Plus, the Skims holiday shop is open. So if you're looking for the perfect gift this season, Skims has you covered. Again, Skims Men's at skims.com. When you place your order, choose podcast in the survey. Select this show from the drop-down to let them know that we sent you. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is also brought to us by our friends at Wayfair. The holidays always show up faster than we expect. If you're still putting together gifts, last-minute decor, or getting your home ready for guests, Wayfair has you covered. Whether you need a quick room refresh, new bedding, or final seasonal touches, Wayfair makes it easy to get what you need fast. Wayfair truly is your one-stop shop for everything home, with decor, furniture, kitchen essentials, and gifts for every style and every budget, all delivered quickly and easily. The selection is massive. Everything you could possibly think of, you can find everything in one place. It's so easy to shop by style. It'll help you pick the pieces that actually fit your home instead of guessing. And the items that you order will instantly refresh your space without a big project. I've ordered several things from Wayfair. The last thing I think was patio furniture. We've gotten rugs from Wayfair. They have a great selection there. Coffee tables, end tables, nightstands, whatever you need, they have it at Wayfair. Get last-minute hosting essentials, gifts for all your loved ones, and decor to celebrate the holidays for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That's Wayfair, WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. All right, so as of right now, your Minnesota Timberwolves are 17-9, which is the 6th seed in the Western Conference. Yes, they're not far out of the 3, even the 2 seed in the West. They're only one back from Denver in the win column. They've actually won more games than Houston at this point because of, Minnesota's played, 26 games, and Houston's only played 24 games. So they've got one more win and 3 more losses. No, wait, I did that math wrong. They played 4 more games than Houston, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So that's, just the way things are shaking out in the West, it's a little bit weird. But Minnesota is one of only 7 teams. Sorry, one of only 8 teams that is single-digit losses so far this season. The most impressive stat is the Wolves are one of 4 teams that have a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense, which they finished with last year. They were one of 6 teams that finished the season that way. As of right now, the only teams with a top 10 unit on both ends of the floor, OKC has the 5th best offense, the 1st defense. Houston is 3rd in both. Detroit is 8th in offense and 2nd in defense. And then Minnesota is 6th in offense and 9th in defense. Nobody else is top 10 in both units. New York, bad defense or average defense. Denver, kind of a poor defense so far. Boston, a poor defense so far. San Antonio, a middling defense so far. Golden State, great defense, terrible offense. Bottom 3rd of the league so far in offense. Orlando, good defense, middling offense. Minnesota, one of 4 teams, along with OKC, Houston, and Detroit, that has top 5 offense and a top 10 defense. Top 10 on both ends of the floor. Significant. And obviously peaks and valleys on both ends of the floor so far this season for Minnesota, not surprising at all. In terms of the schedule and what's upcoming, so you might remember before the season, I predicted that Minnesota would on New Year's Day be 24-7. That obviously can't happen anymore. They're 15-9 currently. 15-9. That's not right. 17-9, I think is what they are. 17-9. So I thought they'd be 24-7. So best case scenario, if they win every game between now and New Year's, I'll be 2 games off there. That's probably not going to happen. And the case I made is, they play Sacramento, Utah, and the Pelicans each at least twice. And they've beaten each of those teams every time. They've actually ended up playing the Kings 3 times. There was the extra cup game in there, or the added game because of the cup. And I think they lost to Sacramento once, but they've swept against the Pelicans and the Jazz. So far, they've only played Boston once, who they beat, and the Thunder once, who they lost to. And 3 total games against the LA teams. Obviously, the Clippers have ended up being bad, but they've lost twice to the Lakers, unfortunately, and they beat the Clippers the one time they played them. They've had no true West Coast road trip yet. They've only played, I think, 2 games is their max on the West Coast. And they've only played 4 back-to-backs. They're the only team in the NBA with no back-to-backs in December at all. Now, they end up playing more games than anybody else in December because they play literally every other day from basically, I think, Wednesday through the end of the calendar year. They're playing every other day. But no back-to-backs in December at all. So I thought Minnesota would have a great start to the season. It was an easy strength of schedule. And yes, in fact, as of right now, Minnesota has the 3rd easiest schedule that they've played so far. The only teams that have played easier schedules, OKC and Denver, who are both ahead of Minnesota, obviously, right now in the standings. OKC's 24-2, Denver's 18-6, entering play on Monday. So the 3rd easiest schedule to this point. According to Tankathon.com, Minnesota has the 4th toughest remaining schedule. They still have to face the Thunder 3 times. They haven't played the Pistons yet. They still have the Knicks once. They got to play the Rockets. They've only played the Rockets once. They still have the Rockets 3 times. And they have Denver. Actually, no, the Wolves haven't played the Rockets yet at all. They only play the Rockets 3 times, but they haven't played them yet. And then they have Denver twice still on the schedule. Now, San Antonio and Denver actually haven't played OKC at all. So that's going to make things a little bit more challenging for them. And that's a benefit to Minnesota. If you look at the standings, at a team that the Timberwolves actually, or that's going to help Minnesota hopefully catch up to those teams. So the third easiest schedule so far, the fourth toughest remaining schedule. But again, the benefit there is the three teams with tougher schedules are all teams ahead of them in the standings, which is fascinating. So that should cancel out a little bit how tough the remaining schedule is for Minnesota. Plus, they've still got 3 more against the Clippers. They've still got 2 against the Pelicans. They still have 1 each against all the bad teams in the East. The Wizards, Pacers, Hornets, Nets. Like, they've got 1 each left against each of those teams. So there's still winnable games on the schedule, of course. But sitting here right now, how difficult some of the schedules are for the teams ahead of them should help Minnesota down the stretch of this season. Obviously, more back-to-backs factor in and some of those different things. But, there's something to like about how the Wolves have taken care of business, by and large, against the teams that they're supposed to beat. And yes, there have been exceptions, right? The double overtime or the single overtime loss in Sacramento, the Suns losses, both disappointing, even though the Suns have been good, disappointing losses. Those are really besides that, I mean, and then the Reeves list, or the, I should say Luka list game where Reeves went nuts way back in October against the Lakers. They haven't lost these games to teams they should beat, other than the Sacramento loss and then these close Suns losses, which at least were close games. They've taken care of business for the most part. Now, for the rest of December, they got to beat Memphis. They got to beat Milwaukee without Giannis. They got to beat, they have Brooklyn, and they have the Bulls, and they have the Hawks on the schedule. They got to win all those games. And then between Denver and OKC and the Knicks, win at least 2 out of those 3. Right? I mean, you could if we look up on New Year's Day and Minnesota's only at 11 losses, given a couple of the losses they've had so far, and given some of the brief absences for guys like Ant, I think that's reasonable. That's a reasonable thing to hope for. Okay. Tomorrow on the show, we'll preview the matchup against Memphis. We haven't seen the Grizzlies. John Morant is back, so we'll talk a little bit about that on Wednesday's show, among other things. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. Of course, if Locked On Wolves made your Spotify Wrapped, you can prove it on social media to secure a free month of the brand new Everydayer Club we talked about earlier. Just tag our national Locked On Podcast Network account on any social platform, and we'll drop you a code. Be one of the first to join the Everydayer Club to get your favorite show ad-free and exclusive access to the members-only Discord channel. Again, if we're on your Spotify Wrapped, just send us a screenshot and tag the Locked On Podcast Network account on any social media platform. You get that first month of the Everydayer Club free. And if you just want to straight sign up for it, head to lockedonwolves.supercast.com. You can sign up there right now. Big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen. Of course, this show is also part of that very same Locked On Podcast Network, your local experts on the biggest stories every single day. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast. We'll catch you next time.